First week, we saw why there was the break in Presbyterianism in the U.S.
在第一堂呢，我们看到在美国的长老会为什么会分裂？
Then why there was Bible-Presbyterian Movement in the U.S.
那为什么在美国又有笃信圣经长老会
in 19 what?
19做什么年？
Who can remember? Very good, 1937.
1937年。
Then Reverend Timothy Toh went to the U.S. to study.
然后杜祥辉牧师去美国读书。
He trained under these men who were separatists, who broke away from ecumenical movements.
他在这些人被分别为圣，从那个普世运动分别出来的导师下学习。
Then when Reverend Timothy Toh came back,
杜祥辉牧师回来后，
being trained under the BP movement there,
在美国受到笃信圣经长老会的训练。
then he saw that in Malaysia, in Singapore, Malaysia, the Presbyterian Synod, the Presbytery was also part of the ecumenical movement.
然后他看到新加坡跟马来西亚那里的长老会呢，也是普世合一运动的一部分。
Then Reverend Toh basically had to break away from Life Presbyterian Church.
所以最基本的呢，杜祥辉牧师就没办法要从生命堂里面分出来。
And he started the Bible-Presbyterian Movement in Asia.
就在亚洲开始了笃信圣经长老会。
And the church that he started was Life Bible Presbyterian Church.
他所创立的教会呢，就是笃信圣经长老会生命堂。
That is in 1955.
在哪一年？1955年。
All right, so the BP movement in Asia started in 1955.
所以1955年笃信圣经长老会运动就在亚洲开始。
Right, so we know how we have BP movement in US and Asia.
所以我们知道，在美国，我们怎么样在美国还有亚洲得到了这笃信圣经长老会的运动。
We know BPCWA was started which year?
我们知道西澳笃信圣经长老会是哪一年开
This
始
is
的？
our 30th anniversary, so that is 1986.
今年是我们30周年，所以是1986年开始。
All right, so in 1950s, we enter now and see what are the problems that attacked the BP movement in Asia.
然后从1955年，我们就今晚看有什么问题来攻击这亚洲的笃信圣经长老会运动。
And then what is the state of Bible Presbyterianism in Asia and in the US?
现在西澳笃信圣经长老会在美国还有亚洲的情况又是如何？
Why are we studying all this?
为什么我们要研究这些呢？
Because God warns that we must be aware of the devices of devil.
因为神警告我们要小心魔鬼的诡计。
We must learn from history.
我们要从历史学到功课。
Actually, we saw how history in the US was repeating in Asia.
其实我们看到历史在美国怎么样在亚洲重演，
And how God used Reverend Timothy Toh to learn that, and then he kept the BP movement fighting against the errors in Christianity.
然后神让杜祥辉牧师看得到，就用他保护笃信圣经长老会不要堕入错误里面。
We must learn from history.
我们要从历史学到
So
功课。
that is why we are studying this.
所以我们今晚就来研究这个问题。
All right, so you turn to your slide.
可以打开你的时间表。
All right, so don't read the details yet. Let me explain.
我先跟你解释，不用去看这个细节哈。
Now you see 1955 on your left.
在左边1955年，
BP movement started
笃信圣经长老会运动开始，
with Live BP Church.
就是笃信圣经长老会生命堂开始。
All right, look at me.
请看，
Now, there are going to be 3 phases in the BP movement that suffered many attacks.
在总的来说呢，这个笃信圣经长老会的运动呢，有3段时间受到很大的攻击。
And during this period, there were breaks, splits in the BP movement.
在这段时段里面呢，有很大在笃信圣经长老会里面就发生了很大的分离。
In Asia, predominantly because in Singapore, really.
主要是在亚洲，或主要是在新加坡，
That is where the BP movement started.
因为笃信圣经长老会就在那里开始。
Now, these periods can be divided into the 70s, 1970s,
我们可以把这个时代分为1970年的时候，
and then the 1980s,
然后1980年代，
and then into the early 2000 until now.
然后在2000年开始，直到现在。
70s, 80s, and then beginning of the 2000 period.
70年代、80年代还有2000年代的时候开始那个。
What were the breaks, splits?
怎么样？他们怎么样分裂的后果？
What caused them?
什么制造这些分裂
What
呢？
are that for us to learn?
这是给我们来学习。
Now, in the 50s to the 80s, the BP movement in Singapore was the fastest growing church.
50年代到80年代，主信圣经长老会的教会在新加坡就是快成长的教会。
You turn to page 2.
你打开第2页
At the top.
上端，
It was, right? So you see, the BP leadership went into a process of decentralization and diversification.
好，你看主信圣经长老会，它领导阶层呢就进入了权力分散及多样化的过程。
It was growing so fast in numbers
那个人数的增长很快，
that they had to split into churches.
结果就必须分为不同的小当地教会。
Now, that's a good split
这是好的分裂，
because they can't house everyone in one church anymore.
因为他们不可以把大家都融在一个教堂里面。
People from all over Singapore was coming to Life Church.
新加坡从每个角落都要来生命堂里面。
It was teaching the truth
他在教导真理，
faithfully,
忠心的
and the sheep just came for the food.
羊群们就是来得到喂养，
It was a faithful movement.
因为这是忠心的运动。
But because of this decentralization, more and more churches,
可是因为有太多的教会，就有一个权力的分散运动呢，
there needed to be more and more pastors and leaders that would run these churches.
就需要更多的年轻人、牧师还有领导人来管理这些教会。
So 50s to 80s, great growth.
对，50年代到80年代很大的增长。
Now, but then in this growth, some problems began to emerge in some of these churches.
可是，在增长当中呢，这些教会里面就产生了一些问题。
In fact, the problem was so great
那个问题其实大到
that it would split the synod, the presbytery.
就会把整个笃信真理长老会大会给分裂出来。
There was a major meeting in 1988
1988年，他们有一个很大的一个会议，
that was so the disagreement was so great they dissolved the synod
那个争议呢是这么大，逼不得已就要把这个大会解散，
and churches went their separate way
然后各个教会就自己走各自的路，
into two major groups predominantly.
主要是分为2大组。
Now the question is, over these 30 years, what caused those things?
问题是这30年，什么事情使到这件事情发生？
Some of this began to emerge in the 70s.
在70年代，有些问题就开始产生了。
You look at your roadmap.
你看你的时间表，
Now, do you see in 1970 there is this person called Kwek Sui Hua?
看到1970年有这个郭瑞华这个人吗？
Now, in 1955, when Reverend started the BP movement, there was a partner with him called Kwek Kiok Chiang. We studied that.
1955年当朱祥卫牧师开始的时候，他有一个伙伴就是郭国昌，他的朋友。
Kwek Kiok Chiang's son was this Kwek Sui Hua.
他的儿子呢就是郭瑞华，
Kwek Suan Yu has no relation to them,
跟郭全佑牧师没有关系。
just in case you're wondering.
如果你在想的话，
Now, Kwek Sui Hua was one of the pastors that went to the U.S., BP pastors that went to the U.S. to study.
郭瑞华呢就是其中一个笃信圣经长老会的牧师，去美国读书。
When he came back, he took over Zion BP Church, which still exists today.
他回来说去接任笃信圣经长老会西安堂，今天还存在。
By the way, Kwek Sui Hua continues to be pastor emerite in that church.
他的爸爸还是在那边。
Kwek Sui Hua, no, Kwek Sui Hua.
郭瑞华
The son.
郭瑞华他还在那个教会里面当那个荣誉牧师
Today
今天还在。
And what I understand, he's also supervisory pastor of some church in Perth. I understand that.
据我知道，他也是监督一些在博斯的一些教会。
Now, Kwek Kiok Chiang has passed away
他的爸爸
not too long back.
去世了，不久前。
Now, when Kwek Sui Hua went to the U.S., he trained and he imbibed many of these modernist and liberal ideas.
郭瑞华他去美国读书的时候，他吸引了很多现代学还有那个自由派学。
And he came back.
他就回来了。
And in 1974,
1974年
In 1974, you turn to page 2.
，1974年我们打开第2页，你看，
In 1974, when he came back in 1970,
1974年他回来后，
Zion BP Church came up with Bible study notes. The Bible study notes is called Focus.
这个西安读经圣经长老会就有了他的查经班讲印，叫做
You see
Focus。
point A?
你看到这个 A 点吗？
Now I'm going to explain the various reasons that is going to cause the synod to dissolve.
那我要解释各个因素使到这个读经圣经大会至于散会。
And in these Bible study notes, they proclaim that the Genesis record is likely to be true.
借着这些查经班的讲义呢，他们就宣告说，叫创世纪的记载最有可能是那正确的记载。
It casts serious doubts on the Genesis creation account.
他对这个创世纪里面的记载呢，他就质疑了。
And they say the patriarchs, they were not hundreds of years old. They were just, every year is just month.
然后他对于圣经里面旧约里面那位族长呢，他说他们其实不是这么老，每个年份其实是代表月份。
950 years? No. How can anyone live so old? Science disproves that.
950年没有一个人能够活这么久的，科学证明不可能活这么久。
Science has disproved the creation account.
科学已经证明创世纪的记载是错的。
So remember we studied in the beginning, these were the ideas of the liberals and the modernists, remember?
记得我们开始的时候，这是自由派还有现代学他们的想法，对不对？
And they began to also doubt that the flood was a global one.
然后他们也质疑说大洪水不是铺满了全世界。
Now this teaching began to grow.
这个教义就开始成长，
And this teaching began to creep into BP leadership.
就开始潜入了笃信圣经长老会的领导阶层。
So that was one thing in 1970s.
1970年代，这就是其中一个因素。
And then at that time, there was this other problem where you look at point B,
然后另外一个问题呢，就在 B 点呢，
where many of the young BP leaders and church leaders,
很多当时年轻的笃信圣经长老会的领导阶层，还有其他领导者，
they began to reject biblical separation.
他就开始了拒绝分别为圣的这个原则。
Look at your notes.
你看你的讲义，
Now, they began to work together, collaborate with new evangelicals, liberals, ecumenists, and modernists.
他就开始跟其他的，好像新福音派主义者、自由派主义者、普世合一主义者，他们合作，
And they were openly working with them.
很公开的跟他们合作。
Now, by the way, all this quotation, I take it from the historical records of our BP movement in Singapore.
顺便说说，我引用这些话句呢，是在我们新加坡的那个记载里面引用的。
And you see the quotation at your footnote at the bottom.
底下有写那个我们是那个源头在哪里？
Many of these are records given by our ex-supervisory pastor, Dr. To Xianghua.
很多这些记载是我们以前前任的监督牧师杜祥和牧师，
He experienced firsthand these problems,
他亲身体验到这些问题，
and he penned this.
然后他就记录下来。
And then there was another problem in the 70s that was emerging.
然后在70年代又有另外一个问题开始出现了，
Look at point C.
就是第C点。
Many of these younger generation, they also began to demand for modern English Bibles.
很多这些年轻的人呢，他们就开始要求使用现代英文版，
And they wanted like NIV, New KJV, basically all the modern English versions.
他们要求新国际版啊，或者新钦定本啊，就是这些现代版。
So imagine in the congregation,
所以你想象在会众里面，
biblical separation is now undesirable. They don't want to practice it, and they're asking for English modern versions as well.
分别是现在不受欢迎的，他们不要去实践的，他们说我们要现代的译本。
And then point D.
然后D 点，
Now, at the same time, there was an increasing sympathy toward charismatic practices.
他们开始逐渐的赞成了灵恩派他们的做法。
This was the last straw that broke the camel's back.
这就是最后的导火线。
So in 1987,
1987年
at the annual pastors' conference at Cameron Highlands.
在金马龙高原里面所举行的一年度的牧师会议上呢，
Some of these younger leaders stood up and wanted to push the motion.
有些这些年轻的领袖就坚持的起来，要坚持他们的立场，
insisting that these tongue speaking are meaningful aesthetic utterances and they have not ceased.
坚持呢方言是有意义的表达出来，还没有终止。
So you see, all this while, these issues were occurring, causing a lot of strife, internal problems.
所以你看，在这一些时间里面呢，这些问题其实在外面运作，渐渐的制造很多问题。
So this was through the 70s, 80s period.
这就是在70到80年代所发生的事。
By the way, look at your notes. Look at your chart.
这一次我们看我们的时间表，
You will see in 1987,
你看1987年，
Reverend Kwek Sui Hua, the son of Kwek Kok Chiang, began to insist on having meaningful aesthetic tongues.
你看郭瑞华牧师在这7届的笃信圣经长老会会议中呢，坚持说这个方言呢是有意义的抵抗表达。
Now at that time, Reverend Kwek Kok Chiang, his father, was still alive.
那时候他的爸爸还在。
Many of our lecturers in FEBC, they actually sat through this meeting.
我们在那个远东神学院里面很多的讲师，他其实在这个会议里面呢都有参加。
They experienced firsthand and they told us what they saw and what they heard.
他们亲身体验到，他就告诉我们他们所看到的，他们所经验的。
Now all this while, one after another of these modern version problems of this working with ecumenism, compromise.
这段时间呢，这一些的问题接一连三的新的译本啊，跟灵魂派他们工作啊这些事，
Questioning the accuracy of the biblical accounts.
对圣经里面的记载质疑。
And then now this tongue speaking.
然后这里说讲方言。
Finally, they say, we want to settle this. We want BP to be believing in these things.
最后他说，我们要来一个决定的解决，我们要笃信圣经长老会都相信这一切。
And they came to a big battle.
所以他们就有了很大的交战。
Reverend Timothy To and Reverend Kok Kok Chiang, remember they founded the BP movement in Asia.
杜祥辉牧师和郭父亲呢，他们就记得吗？他在新加坡创立了笃信圣经长老会。
And it was very sad.
很可悲的。
Because on that day, when this argument was going on and the decision was to be made,
因为当天他们有这些争论的时候，必须做出个决定的时候，
what would BP stand for?
笃信圣经长老会到底要站立在什么
We
呢？
broke away because of all these false movements,
我
false
们
teachings.
因为有这些假的教义，所以就跟他们分离了。
Moving forward, what will BP stand for?
向前进呢，我们笃信圣经长老会是代表什么呢？
And it came to the time.
就是时间到了。
But Reverend Kok Kok Chiang said this.
这个郭国昌他就说，
Something along these lines.
大概是这样子说。
He said, it's a very difficult day for me.
他说这天对我来说是非常困难的。
Now I have to choose between Reverend Timothy To, my old friend, who stands for the Orthodox BP beliefs,
我现在要选杜祥辉牧师，他站立在正统的信仰上。
and I also have to choose between him and or my son, who believes who does not believe in the biblical records.
我要选他，还是要选我的儿子？他选择不相信圣经里面的记载。
My son, who insists that tongue speaking still exists.
我的儿子，他坚持讲方言还存在。
It's a very difficult and sad day for me.
对我来说，这是很困难、很可悲的一天。
I have to choose my son.
我就要选我的儿子，
I have to take his side.
我要选他那一边。
And that was when BP, one group of churches, followed Kwek Kok Chiang and Kwek Sui Hua, and another group stayed faithful with Reverend Timothy To.
就是在那一天，一组教会呢就跟着郭家父子俩，另外一组呢就跟着杜祥辉牧师。
And the synod dissolved.
然后大会就如此
It went separate ways, these BP churches, two groups.
所有的教会呢就各自走各路。
Now, if you were there, what would you have been thinking?
如果你当时在那里呢，你心里会想，
Or one day you have to make a choice.
或者一天你必须做出选择，
Your children,
你的子女，
or your father, or your father who is a church leader,
或是你父亲是教会的领袖，
or your best friend,
或是你最好的朋友，
or your wife, or your husband.
或者你的妻子、你的丈夫。
When it comes to this, how would you choose?
当你要做出选择的时候，你会怎样选择呢？
The question is never do I choose between you or another person?
问题不是说我选你还是另外一个人，
What should the question be?
问题是什么呢？
The question should be
问题应该是
between falsehood or truth.
是真理还是假教育？
We must never forget this biblical principle.
我们千万不可以忘记这个
The reason why
原则。
there became these two big groups.
为什么会造成有这两大？
The reason why there was a group that became exactly what BP did not want to be.
为什么有一组成为笃信圣经长老会所不愿他们成为的一组？
Exactly why BP movement was formed in the US and in Asia.
就是为什么我们在美国还有在亚洲成立笃信圣经长老会的
Because
原因？
a leader failed.
因为一个领导者失败了。
Do you understand how important that is?
你明白这个原则何等重要吗？
So, when interviewed,
所以当他去跟他访问的时候，
look at page 1.
看第一页，
The quote at the bottom from Reverend Timothy Toe.
这里是杜祥威牧师所说的话。
Let's just look at some of the earlier statement now. So I describe, as the BP movement grew, younger men went overseas and imbibed liberal and new evangelical theology.
所以这个是笃信圣经长老会，他们成长的时候，很多年轻人去美国那边就吸收了他们的自由教导。
And while wearing BP names, they were playing the new evangelical game.
虽然他们是挂名说是笃信圣经长老会，可是他们其实是玩这个新福音派的游戏。
And Reverend Timothy Toe basically made this assessment. At every synod meeting, there was a tussle, a fight.
然后杜祥辉牧师呢就这么说，在每个大会开始的时候呢，都是有一个大争议。
Now, ultimately, it was really a tussle between fundamentalism and new evangelicalism.
最后呢，其实这个交战呢是跟基要主义和自由主义。
The one thing that split the BP movement in 1988 was this new evangelical mindset.
在1988年能够把这个大会分开的呢，就是因为他们有这个新福音派的这个想法。
What is new evangelicalism?
什么是新福音派？
We must understand it.
我们要明白，
Because it is, of all the movement, one of the most poisonous and dangerous.
因为所有的运动中呢，这个是最狠毒、最危险的一个。
Look at your notes, page 1.
你看你的讲印第一章，
Now, new evangelicalism is a movement that began in 1948.
这个运动呢是1948年开始的。
Basically, Harold Ockenga, the founder, he was against biblical separation.
剧组基本呢，奥肯加这个创造者呢，他是对抗基要分别为圣这个运动，
And he wanted to push the social gospel.
要推广社会福音。
One of his statements was, you look at Ockenga's dislike of fundamentalism is evident when he says that fundamentalism are doing irreparable harm to our movement by identifying Christianity with thou shalt not.
这里说他基要派基要派主义者呢，使基督教等同于你不可，以造成无可弥补的伤害。
And he said they have lost all joy out of Christianity and Christian living.
因此，他们失去了基督教与基督徒生活一切的喜乐，
They have made it negative.
他们让一切都变成很消极。
So to Harold Ockenga, the Bible, we should not talk about thou shalt nots. It makes Christianity very negative.
所以对奥肯加来说呢，我们不应该说你不可，因为这使基督教成为很消极。
Actually, when we look at the Ten Commandments,
其实我们看十诫的时候，
is it mainly thou shalt not or thou shalt?
是不是你不可，还是说你必须要？
When you look at scriptures, there's a lot of negative forbidding.
在圣经里面有很多消极，说你不可以这样去做。
But his mentality is, you see, when you say not, the world don't like it.
可是他的想法是，当你说你不可的时候，世界不喜欢。
But actually, they had a lot of thou shalt not themselves.
可是他们自己也有很多你不可的条规。
Thou shalt not criticize when they teach wrong doctrines.
你不可以批评一个人，当他教导你假教义的时候。
Thou shalt not thou shalt not say that that thou shalt not say that evolution is wrong.
你不可说进化论是错的，
Because the world believes it.
因为世界上相信。
Thou shalt not insist that miracles are real.
你不可以坚持说奇迹是真的。
Thou shalt not break away from those that are ecumenical. They had many thou shalt not
你
actually.
不可以以普世运动分离。
My friends, when we begin to think anything that says Christianity says thou shalt not, it is not good, we are already beginning to have the beginnings of Harold Ockenga's New Evangelicalism.
朋友们，当你开始想到说圣经里面说你不可的时候是不应该有的话，
Now,
你其实是开始有了像 Ockenga 他这样的想法。
With that mindset, he went forth to push very hard his agenda.
有这样的想法呢，他就很大力的去推广他的
To
目标
embrace and to work together with everyone.
要大的与大家一起同工。
He hated biblical separation.
他很憎恨分别为圣。
Now, why do I say because New Evangelicalism is very dangerous?
为什么说新福音派很危险呢？
Look at your notes.
你看你的讲义，
Can you see it is a mindset of compromise.
这就是说一个概念是要妥协的概念。
New Evangelicalism is not just a movement, it's a mindset, it's a way of thinking.
这不只是一个运动而已，这是一种想法，一种理念。
The New Evangelical mindset, their motto is love at all cost.
他们的目的呢是不惜代价的要去爱，
Now, love is not wrong,
爱没有错，
but love is always in truth.
可是爱要在真理里面去爱。
BPCWA does not propound a doctrine that does not include love.
基要主教长会不会宣讲说爱如果是不
God is love.
的真理，神是爱，
But it is not love at all cost, even compromised truth.
但不惜代价的爱就包括了妥协真理。
And to them, the most important doctrine in the Bible is saving souls.
对他们来说，圣经里面最重要的教育呢，就是拯救灵魂，
Evangelism.
拯救灵魂
That's all.
就是要如此
Save people after that, don't tell them how to live.
得救后呢，就不要告诉他们要怎样去生活。
Therefore, all other doctrines are either not taught or minimized.
所以其他的教育呢，要不就是贬低，要不就是不教。
Now, if you go to a church, or if our church one day become a church where we say, let's not focus on teaching anything in depth.
如果你去了一个教会，或以后我们的教会说，我们不要注重去深奥的教某个教义，
Let's just keep preaching about go out and win souls
我们只是教导说去外面要赢得灵魂，
and love everyone.
然后大家都爱，
Whatever they teach, just love them. Don't criticize.
无论他们教什么，我们都爱，不要去批评。
In fact, this is a very common thinking in most churches today,
其实这在很多教会都是有这样子的一个概念，
even in fundamental churches,
就连在基要的教堂里面都一样，
where focus of studies of Christ is reduced.
他们要研究我们主耶稣的生平是降低。
Why do you want to teach us the creeds, the confessions?
为什么你们要教导我们这些信念呢？
Why do you want to teach us about the various eschatology and various aspects of Christ's obedience?
为什么你要教导要关于这么多神学呢？包括了主耶稣的顺服，
Not important.
不重要的
In。fact, I actually heard someone he said, oh, this person say, why our Bible studies always must be so in-depth?
我就是听到有人说，为什么我们查经班要如此的深奥？
Now, he said, keep it high level so we don't offend anyone.
就简单一点，好让我们不会得罪任何。
Every kind of belief can exist in the church when you don't teach doctrines.
在教会里面呢，各种不同的信仰都可以包含在里面，只要我们不要。
So that's the mentality.
这就是他们的想法。
So you look at your notes.
所以你看你的讲义。
So the mindset of joining hands with all denominations regardless of doctrinal differences and maintaining peace at all costs.
就是不顾教义上的分差，与其他宗派联手，而且不惜任何代价的保持和谐。
That's the most important thing in New Evangelical mindset.
对他们的新派呢，新福音主义者呢，他们这个概念是很重要的。
Now, this kind of thinking has infiltrated into the very heart of fundamental churches.
这样子的想法呢，就参透了很多基要教堂里面去。
This was what caused the US to split.
这就是使到美国他们怎么样分
You
裂。
remember the first session, the Presbyterians said, don't criticize when people teach any doctrines, even wrong, just don't criticize, just tolerate.
记得第一堂我们看到长老会他们说，你不要去批评他们，就算他们教的是假教义，不要去批评他们，我们容忍就是了。
Just compromise.
我们妥协，
Just accept them
接受他们，
so that we have unity.
好让我们能够得到合一。
So, as a result of all this, the first split.
结果因为这些因素，就有了第一个分裂。
Actually, you look at page 2,
然后你看第二页讲义第2页，
at the bottom.
在下面。
But at the same time, in 1988, Pastor Philip Heng of Galilee BP
同个时候，在1988年，在加利利堂的黄菲利牧师，
he started to keep teaching and practicing exorcism.
他开始教导并做赶鬼的运动，
Keep casting out demons from people.
一直要从人身上把鬼吹出去。
And they will stay overnight in church.
在教会隔夜通宵在那边等。
Our lecturer said he had to be part of it.
我们讲员说，他们必须成为这运动的一部分。
I cast out the demon of eating pork in you.
我把在你里面吃猪肉的魔鬼驱掉，
All sorts of things.
各种不同的鬼。
Now, it became such a obsession in the church, always about exorcism.
整个教会呢，就是沉迷在这个事情上，就关注在怎么样去赶
It
鬼，
caused a split also.
就产生了另外一个分裂。
Now, we must be aware of these things.
我们要注意这些事情。
I won't say too much, but there was once this almost happened in this church when I was here.
我不要讲的太多，可是当我在这里的时候呢，曾经也有类似的事情要发
And
生。
at that time, I just finished writing my ordination paper and to research these things.
那个时候我刚好写完我要案例考试的题目，我要就有这些事情发生，我就去研究调查。
And I had to learn, make sure these don't occur in this church.
所以我要去学习，要确保这些事情不会在这个教会发生。
Someone came in.
有人进来了，
It would have become like that. The person began to draw a lot of attention.
就会像这样的事情发生，它会吸引很多注意力。
But as I was doing my papers, I learned one thing.
可是当我研究做我的功课的时候，我学到一个
In the
功
New
课，
Testament,
在新约里
there's
面
no more exorcism
没有赶鬼了，
in our times.
在我们的时代，
How do you how do you chase out demons in someone?
你怎么样帮一个人把他身体的鬼赶出去呢？
How?
怎么样？
Bring cross.
拿十字架，
Very good. Get the person saved.
叫那个人去得救，
Preach the gospel.
向他传福
Keep
音，
preaching the gospel.
一直向他传福音。
Because when the person is saved, the person is the holy temple of God.
因为当他得救的时候，他的身体就是圣洁的神的殿，
Demons cannot possess the holy temple of God.
魔鬼就不能够占有神的殿。
So it's to deal with it very calmly, deal with salvation. Not say, okay, let's all go into the room and exorcise. In the name of Jesus, I cast this demon out and that demon out.
要很镇定的去处理，不要就是集中精神在房间里面就去赶鬼，说奉主耶稣的名把你赶走。
The person began to disrupt our prayer meetings,
那个人就开始骚扰了我们的祷告
our
会，
fellowship groups.
我们的团契。
I was a few times pulled out to go and deal with it.
很多时候我被拉出去要去处理这些事情。
You see how the devil's tricks don't change very much?
你看魔鬼的诡计没有改变很多。
In fact, I believe that anyone who wants to be a pastor, a church leader, an elder, a deacon,
其实我相信任何人要成为教会的领袖，不论是牧师、长老或者执事。
in fact, this is a practice in many churches, BP churches.
其实，在很多主信圣经上会都有这样的概念。
You must write a set of papers.
你要写一些文章，
You must do a set of research.
你要做一些研究。
When I wrote my papers, I did not understand these topics, why these topics were selected.
当我做我的研究的时候，我不明白为什么我必须要研究这些话题。
But because as I studied the history, I realized history keeps repeating in BP churches.
可是当我查考历史的时候，我发现到历史在主信圣经上会一直的在重复。
As a church leader, when you know them, you quickly identify, discern, and you know what to do and what not to do.
当你是个教会领袖的时候，你就会很清楚的看到这个花样，你就会很快的去采取行动，知道要怎么去做。
Now that was one split.
这就是一个分裂。
You look at your notes, your roadmap.
看你的时间表，
So you see 1988,
1988年
dissolve the synod because of
大会
tongues.
上因为方言的事，
Bible versions, different Bible versions began to arise.
圣经版本的问题，
Now, so that was one split, major one.
这是一个很大的分裂。
Then you think things would maybe settle down.
你就以为说事情就会安定下来。
Now, but very soon, another split in the late 90s, early 2000 is going to start.
可是很快的，在90末代的时候，在2000年开始的时候，另外一个分裂又要发生了。
This time is going to involve the Bible again.
这次又会再关系到圣经的问题。
So you have two big groups, right? In BP now.
你两大组了，对不对？
Life BP Church was faithful with Reverend Timothy Toe.
主信圣经长老会生命堂忠心与主像杜祥威牧师一样。
But then in 1999,
可是，在1999年
11 years after the major split,
11年离开大分裂后11年，
turn to your notes,
打开你的讲义，
page 3.
第3页。
The last paragraph, or Chinese page 4.
中文版是第4页。
A controversy began to arise.
有一个大争议开始发生了。
All right, look up first. I try to explain this passage.
我来解释这一段。
Now, in 1999, a book called From the Mind of God to the Mind of Man was published in Christian world.
1999年呢，有一本书就是从神的思想至人的思想，
You see-
在基督界里面就出版了，
You see in your notes, it was published by Bob Jones University.
是这个 Bob Jones 大学里面出版的。
And also in 2001, there's another book that was published, One Bible Only, by Central Baptist Seminary.
然后2001年呢，也有一本书，就是独有一本圣经吗？就是中央浸会神学院出版的。
Now, when BJU produced this book, and the other book by Central Baptist Seminary, these books began to attack the KJV.
当这个金斯大学还有这个神学院他出版这些书的时候呢，他们就开始了攻击钦定本。
They began to attack that the Bible is fully preserved without error.
他们开始去攻击说圣经是全部保留没有错谬的。
And this book was given by a live church elder who read it, and he began to give it to members to read.
这两本书呢就被这个生命堂里面的一个长老读了，他就开始分这些书。
Now there have all the while been this brewing, this desire to have modern versions, right?
一直以来，他们心里面都要有一个新翻译本，对不对？
Now this caused great confusion in the church.
在教会里面呢，就产生了很大的模糊。
You look at your notes.
你看你的讲义
Chinese page 4, first paragraph, English page 3, last paragraph.
中文版第4节第4页。
There began to be an issue between Life Church and Far Eastern Bible College.
在主信圣经长老会生命堂呢，就与远东神学院之间又有了问题。
This would lead to another split within the BP movement.
在主信圣经长老会运动里面呢，就产生了另外一个分裂。
What was this controversy about?
这个交易是什么呢？
Look at your notes. The controversy was a doctrinal and spiritual one.
这个教义呢是属灵还有教义上的争议。
It had to do with the question of whether the Bible we have today is 100% perfect without any mistake, or does it have mistake?
这关系到我们今天所拥有的圣经是否是100%完全不含任何错误和问题，还是会有一点错误问题。
These books that were published, they said there are mistakes.
这些出版的书说有问题有错误。
But Reverend, look at your last paragraph of this. The Reverend Timothy Toe was the pastor of Life BP Church since its founding in 1950.
你再就一遍，你看，自1950年主信圣经长老会生命堂被创立以来呢，杜祥辉牧师都担任了生命堂的牧师。
And his two assistants began to turn against him and say, Reverend Toe, we do not believe that God preserved His word and therefore is perfect.
他两个助理牧师呢，就跟他说：“我们不相信神保守了他的话语，然后神的圣经就是完美的、完全的。”
And they resigned from teaching in the Bible college as well.
他们就从远东神学里面辞职不教了。
What is this issue about?
那个问题到底是什么？
Now, please remember that since the 70s, there was an oath that the church leaders would take as well as the Bible college leaders would take.
记得在70年代起呢，在教会里面每个会员，还有那个神学会里面的每个会员，他们都要申约。
This oath is called the Dean-Bergen oath. You look at page 4 for the English at the bottom,
你
the
看
footnote.
英文版里面第4页，
I think in Chinese it's page 6.
华文版好像是第6页。
You see your footnote.
你看那个根据那里哈。
The oath goes like this.
那个
Can you see the Dean-Bergen oath? Who can find it? I need you to read that.
你看到没有？
Am I correct? Page 4 at the bottom, English, Dean-Bergen oath. Correct? Chinese, page 6 at the bottom, correct? Correct? Dean-Bergen oath. All right, someone who has Chinese Dean-Bergen oath at the bottom.
Page 5.
Page 5 for Chinese, I'm sorry. Page 5 at the bottom. Now, can the English people read with me the Dean-Bergen oath? And you tell me if this oath is such a wicked oath that we should never take it.
英文版呢，先跟牧师一起念，然后我们看这个誓约呢，是不是这么的邪恶，我们不应该去立这个誓约。
You see, these people begin to say, I cannot take this oath. It's terrible.
然后这些人说，我们不可以照这个跟着这个来誓约，因为这个誓约很糟糕。
Now, let's read what it is.
我们来一起读。
The Bible is none other than the voice of him that sitteth upon the throne. Every book of it, every chapter of it, every verse of it, every word of it, every syllable of it, every letter of it is the direct utterance of the Most High. The Bible is none other than the Word of God, not some part of it more, some part of it less, but all alike, the utterance of him who sitteth upon the throne, faultless, unerring, supreme. Let's read it in Chinese.
我们在华语第5页那边第16点哈，我们读是圣经是坐在宝座上之神的话语，每一本书、每一章节、每一经文、每一个字、每一音节、每一字母，都是至高者直接的信神词。圣经是神的话语，并非部分多部分少，而是完全皆为坐在宝座上之神的言辞，无缺陷、无错误，至高无上。
Is it a very bad oath?
是不是很不好的一个誓约？
So terrible Christians should not say it.
这么糟糕，我们不应该去念。
That the Bible is exactly the words of God as He spoke and it was written.
对，就是说圣经就是说神所说的话，就写一字一句记载下来。
And today we have it. Every single book, chapter, word, verse, syllable, letter is exactly as God intended it to be. We have it.
今天我们都有了每一本书、每一个章节、每一个经文、每一个字、每一个音节、每一个字母，都是至高者直接的话语，而我们今天都有了。
Every part is exactly as God said it.
全部就是神一字一句的说出来。
We have it today.
我们今天有了。
Is it so terrible?
真的这么糟糕吗？
Now, they do not believe in this doctrine of preservation.
他们不相信这个神保留他的话语的教义。
What does the Bible promise about His word?
圣经里面应许了关于神的话语什么呢？
Now, please understand, this split the BP move, the remainder part, the good part, it split them again. So it's very serious. You better understand it.
这个分离呢是很严重的，因为那个好的那一部分又在分裂了，所以这个是很严重的，我们要明白。
Now, there are some Christians say, can you please don't talk about this VPP?
有些人说，请你不要讲关于这个圣经这个朱字朱句能够完全被保守的一个教义。
Because it split churches in Singapore.
因为在新加坡把很多教会分裂了。
Now, the ecumenical movement, the charismatic movement, split churches in Singapore.
在新加坡呢，普世合一运动还有云安派呢，都把很多教会分
Should we
裂。
not talk about that?
难道我们不要讲关于他们吗？
The 5 solas of our faith, the fundamentals of our faith.
我们信仰的5大唯一。
It split Christianity into two in the whole world, to Roman Catholics and Protestants, the Reformed faith.
把全世界的基督教分成两大组，罗马天主教还有抗罗教。
Should we not talk about salvation by grace through faith alone?
难道我们不要讲到得救是要靠恩典
Because
唯有
it
信吗？
split the whole Christendom.
因为把整个基督教都分了。
By the way, there were people who thought like that then.
你顺便提到，当时很多人都如此的去想。
There were people who accused Calvin of keep teaching salvation by grace.
有些人指责加尔文说，你不应该教导说得救是要靠恩典。
The issue today is God's word.
今天的问题呢是关于
What is this about?
这到底是什么问
We
题？
can pretend to be ostriches.
我们可以像鸵鸟一样，
Hide our head under the sand.
把我们的头埋在泥坑里。
Just as long as we don't hear it, we don't know it, we are safe.
只要你听不到、看不到，我们就得救了。
When the lion comes after the ostrich bury the head under the sand.
狮子来是鸵鸟说，他把头埋在泥堆里，
Does it mean the danger is gone?
是不是危险就过去了
No.
没有
We，got to understand and know what to do.
你要明白要怎么样去做。
So what is this verbal plenary preservation?
所以这个的教导呢，朱字注句完全被保守的教育是什么呢？
I explained what is new evangelicalism. Now I explain what is VPP.
我已经解释了什么是心灵恩派我现在来解释这个教育是什么。
Now look at page 3 for English, page 3 for I think Chinese at the bottom, and then page 4.
中文版是第3页，然后
英文是第3。
英文也是第3。
All right. Can you see VPP?
你看到了没有？注字注句完全被保守。
Now verbal means every word and every jot and tittle.
注字注句呢，就是说每一个字、每一点一画都包括在内。
Every single word, every single stroke of a letter.
每个字、每一点、每一画都包含在里面。
Plenary means scripture as a whole,
完
intact.
全被保守，就是全部的圣经全部原
Not
封
just
不变，
alphabets, but every book, every chapter, the whole book together.
不只是每个字，而每一本书、每个章节全部。
P is preservation, is preserved.
就是 P 就是代表保守，
And
保守了，
preserved perfectly by God,
完全被神保守，
without any loss to the original words.
跟原文里面没有任何泄露，
Prophecies, promises, commandments, doctrines, and truth.
就是预言、应许、诫命、教义还有真理，
Not just words of salvation,
不只是关乎救恩的字而已，
but of history, geography, and science.
也关于了历史、地理还有科学的字句也包括。
Why do we believe that?
为什么我们相信这个
Because the
教义
Bible says so. Look at Psalm 12, 6 to 7.
因为圣经如何教导？你看诗篇12章6到7节，
Now, God says the words of the Lord are pure words.
耶和华的言语是纯洁的言语，
As silver tried in a furnace of earth purified 7 times means it's very, very pure. It's without any error.
如同银子在泥炉中炼过7次，就是没有错谬的。
Now, pure, God's way is very pure, very good. But if we lose it, it's no use, right?
他说是神的话是纯洁的言语，对不对？可是如果你失去了就不好了。
That's
对
why
不对
God said, Thou shalt keep them.
所以这里说你必保护他们，
Nothing is lost.
没有任何被遗失。
God is the one who keeps.
神是在保护着。
Now, as if it's not enough, it's not just keep. Thou shalt, O Lord, thou shalt preserve them.
似乎保护不够，然后神要去保佑他们。
Means something goes wrong while God is keeping, God will act and preserve it.
就是当神保护的时候，如果有出什么差错，神会动工去保护。
From this generation forever means every generation will have it.
永离脱离这世代的人，就是说永远的世世代代都会有。
Matthew 5:18.
马太福音5章。
For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass away from the law till all be fulfilled. This is Christ's own words.
我实在告诉你们，就是到天地都废去了，律法的一点一画也不能废去，都要成全。
Now, what is God saying?
神到底在说什么呢？
What is jot and tittle? Some of you understand, the rest don't, so please be
一
patient.
点一画是什么呢？有些人明白，有些不明白，请你忍耐一下。
You know our alphabet I?
你懂我们讲英文字母这个 I 这个字母，
Is this I? It's not really I until you put this dot, right?
这个
Right.
I 一画下来，然后要加上一点才算是 I。
This dot is very important to make it I.
那一点很重要，不然就不成 I 了，
If not, look like what? L, right?
不然就像另外字母 L。
Now, in the Hebrew letter, alphabets,
在原文里面，
the smallest and simplest alphabet is called yod.
最小的字母呢，就是叫做 yod 这个字，
Yod is just like that.
就是这样一点。
You need binoculars at the back?
后面需不需要望远镜来看？
That is what it is. Very, very insignificant. Just a little 一撇 like that. That's it.
一点一片，这样一点，
That's it.
就是这样子。
That's why when we do Hebrew reading, we're very scared. Make sure you don't miss it. Now, then that is called jot.
这是叫 jot，
Huh?
一点，圣经里面指的一点。
In fact, the word Jehovah,
耶和华那个字在原文里面，
one of the alphabet in it is this kind of things.
其中一个字母就是这样子的
Then
一个字母，
Then there is tittle.
然后一
tittle.
画呢，
Now, tittle is, now in Hebrew, this is R. It's resh, R, pronounced R. R.
原文里面这样这个字叫做 r， 这样子去发
Okay,
音。
I don't show you. Now, this is become D, the.
这边画出一点点就会变成的了。
Those at the back, can you see?
后面看得到吗？
There is this little thing that extends here.
这边尾巴消出一点点，
It's called a tittle.
就叫做这个一画。
God say, my alphabets will not go wrong.
神说我的字母是不会有差错
I
的，
will not a single one of it will be lost.
没有任何一字都会失去。
So among the millions and millions of alphabets in the Bible,
在百万中的字母里面，是
every single alphabet,
每一个字母，
God promised to preserve it.
神应许要保护。
Now, were there, so God promised that, right? God said, I preserve it. God promised. We
神
believe
应
it.
许了他说我要保护了，我们就相信。
So let me explain to you what VPP is very simply.
那我要简单的跟你们说，诸字诸句完全被保守教义是什么？
It simply means that God has preserved His words for us down to the minutest accuracy of alphabets not going wrong even.
就是说，神保守了他给我们的话语，包括了在最低微、最详细的字母里面都保守了。
Can you believe that?
你相信这样子吗？
If you don't believe that, I get very worried because how can God preserve your soul, you know?
如果你不相信，那我就很担心了。那神怎么去保守你的灵魂呢？
Now, number one, it means that. Number two, it looks like what?
这就是第一点。第二点就是像什么？
Ten Commandments written on what?
十诫写在什么上？
Stones, right?
石板上，对不对？
Then later, books written on animal skin.
然后写在那个
I don't know how to draw animal skin.
那个
Rolls,
书文上，
right? Rolls.
对不对？
Now,
书卷上。
do we still have this today?
今天我们还有吗？
Have not.
还有没有？
All gone, right?
都没有了。
But all the while, people were copying. People were copying.
可是很多时候，很多人都在抄写，
Copy,
在抄。
all right? While people are copying, are there errors?
人家在抄的时候会不会犯错？
Got error or not?
会不会？
But you say God preserve it.
可是你说神保守啊，
How can there be errors?
怎么会有错误呢？
No, everyone who copy must be perfect.
每个被抄的都要抄的对，
Everyone who copy, there can be errors.
当然会抄错，也会有错误。
Now, when copying, there are two kinds of errors.
可是，在抄的时候会可能犯两个
One
错，
is purposeful.
一个就是故意的。
Those that don't believe in the doctrines, they purposely change. They do not want Jesus to be God, so those verses, they change it.
那些不相信的呢，他就故意把正义改掉，他不要耶稣是神，他就把那个字故意去改
And
掉。
then those that are not on purpose, accidental.
那些是不小心的，
All right? Now, it occurs.
当然会发生。
But God promised that despite man's errors, purposeful or accidental,
可是神应许说，不论是神故意的还是不小心的，
God
他都会保
God will intervene
他会插手，
and He will make sure that there are copies that are perfectly accurate.
他会保佑，必会有其他正确的版本在里面，
Understand?
明白吗？
So those perfect ones, the church, they always could read it, they always identified, and it began to transmit through the ages.
然后那个教会就有这些正确的版本，他们就会去读，然后去分拨给别人。
The bad ones get thrown into dustbins.
不好的呢就丢掉，
All right?
对不对？
Do you believe that God can do this
你相信神会这样去做
through
吗
the？ages?
世世代代如此，
That until today,
直到现
this
在
very moment,
这个时候，
the Hebrew Of course, this preservation is Hebrew and Greek. Last time, no English yet, all right?
当然，这个保守是原文，还有那个希腊文。
Please note, Ten Commandments is not in English.
记得当时不用英文，十诫不是用英文写的。
Now, so today, the Hebrew